Chapter 3. I've got to get off the phone, Josh. Mom's calling me down for dinner. Emily twisted her fingers in a white phone cord. She had been lying on her back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, but now she pulled herself up and prepared to hang up the phone. Yeah, okay, come over later, she said, hearing water running in the bathroom and figuring it must be Jessie. But give me time to finish writing my report. I've got about another hour to go on it. Josh had already finished the paper he was working on, of course, Mr. Super Speed. If he didn't finish an assignment 2 or 3 days early, he thought he was slipping. It drove Emily crazy. She was a hard worker, but she always had to work right down to the last minute. Yeah, it's going pretty well with Jessie, she said, lowering her voice. I really can't talk now. She's right across the hall in the bathroom. Yeah. We haven't really talked much. She's been so busy getting used to a new school and everything. She's still real tense. I don't know if it's me or what. It's definitely you, Josh said, and then laughed, his silly high-pitched laugh. Maybe she's just a tense person, Emily said, ignoring his joke. Well, see you later. Come after 9, okay? She stood up and replaced the receiver, tried to straighten her hair, frowning into the full-length mirror on the closet door, and then hurried downstairs to the dining room. Jessie has barely said 5 words to me in the 3 days she's been here, she thought. Emily couldn't help but feel disappointed. She had looked forward to having a new sister, but so far she and Jessie were just 2 strangers who happened to share a room. Sorry I'm late, she said, scooting into her place. Mr. Wallner was already finished with his plate of macaroni. He always sat down and started to eat whether anyone was at the table or not. Across from him, Nancy yawned loudly. Sorry, she said, shaking her head. I was up studying till nearly 2 last night. You really are working hard this year, Mrs. Wallner said, passing the bowl of macaroni to Emily. You should get your beauty sleep, Mr. Wallner said. It must have been meant as a joke because he stopped chewing for a moment to laugh. He looked disappointed that no one else at the table saw the humor of it. Pass the salt and pepper, he muttered. Is it too bland? Mrs. Wallner asked. No, it's fine, he replied, using both hands to cover his food with salt and pepper at the same time. Rich, silent as usual, sat staring into his plate, occasionally lifting a macaroni noodle or two to his mouth. Where's Jessie? Nancy asked. I think she's upstairs in the bathroom, Emily said, reaching for the salad bowl. Did you brush your hair today? Mrs. Wallner asked, making a disapproving face at Emily. I have to wash it tonight, Emily said, annoyed. Her mother knew she didn't like to talk about her hair. Come on, Rich, dig into that macaroni, Mr. Wallner said, pouring more pepper on his. It's delicious. I'm not very hungry, Rich said solemnly. You're never hungry, Mr. Wallner grumbled. That's why you look like a macaroni noodle. Hey, why are you always putting me down? Rich shouted, immediately angry. I wasn't putting you down. That was a compliment, Mr. Wallner said, smiling at Rich. You can shove your compliments, Rich cried, angrily tossing his fork down onto his plate and storming out of the room. Hey, come back here, Mr. Wallner called after him, startled and obviously upset. I was just teasing you. He turned to Emily's mother. What's with that kid? 13 is a really hard age, Mrs. Wallner said, suddenly looking very tired. I'll make it a lot harder for him, Mr. Wallner said, but it wasn't a threat. Everyone could see that he was very upset by Rich's angry reaction. He reached for the salad bowl and piled a heap of lettuce on his plate. I'm getting sick and tired of him running away anytime anybody says anything to him. He's very sensitive, Mrs. Wallner said softly. Don't defend him. I wasn't defending him. I was just explaining. Well, don't explain either. Mr. Wallner angrily forked lettuce into his mouth. Sorry I'm late. I got hung up, Jessie said, hurrying into the room. Her blonde hair sparkled under the dining room lights. She was wearing gray wool slacks and a long pale green sweater. Hey, my sweater, Emily cried. What? Jessie scooted her chair in and gave Emily a confused look. That's my sweater. You're wearing my sweater, Emily insisted, sounding angrier than she had intended. No, it isn't, Jessie said, spooning a small helping of macaroni onto her plate. I'm afraid it must be cold by now, Mrs. Wallner said, frowning. Jessie, that sweater was in my top drawer, Emily said, unable to keep the shrillness from her voice. I really wish you wouldn't borrow my stuff without asking. But it's my sweater, Jessie insisted. I know my own sweater, Emily said, feeling herself lose her temper, knowing she was getting out of control, but unable to do anything about it. Look how big it is on you. The shoulders are almost down to your elbows. They're supposed to be. It's an oversized sweater, Jessie said huffily. Girls, please, Mr. Wallner said, wearily resting his bald head on one hand. Mom, Would you please tell Jessie not to wear my sweaters? Emily pleaded. Mrs. Wallner looked at Emily, then at Jessie. I really don't remember that sweater, Em, she said uncertainly. Maybe it just looks like yours. Ah! Her mom's reply really infuriated Emily. Why was she taking Jessie's side? It's not your sweater, Jessie insisted heatedly. I've had it for years. Listen, Mr. Wallner said, rubbing his eyes. He turns to Emily. What difference does it make? You two are sisters now, right? That's right, Emily's mother said quickly, too quickly as far as Emily was concerned. I'm sure there will be times when you'll want to borrow Jessie's clothes, Em. How could I? Emily shrieked. Look at her. She's 5 sizes smaller than I am. Mrs. Wallner's mouth dropped open. She always did that when she was surprised by something someone said. Don't exaggerate, dear. Let's finish our dinner in peace, said Nancy, who had been watching the entire argument in silence. Then we'll go upstairs and do a fingerprint test on your dresser, okay? For some reason, Mr. Wallner found this very funny. He laughed, scratching his bald head. Obviously, this was the end of the discussion. Emily didn't feel much like eating, but she begrudgingly began forking cold macaroni and cheese into her mouth. She knew Jessie was looking at her, but she refused to return her glance. Nancy, do you have a date Saturday night? Mrs. Wallner asked, changing the subject. Mrs. Bergen called and asked if you were free to babysit. Yeah, I don't have a date, Nancy said, sighing. I'll call her later. Glad someone's earning a little money around here, Mr. Wallner muttered, looking at Jessie. She didn't respond. They finished their dinner in silence. Who's going to clean up? Mrs. Wallner asked. Now, don't everybody volunteer at once? Mr. Wallner grinned. Not me. That's what I like about living with four women. There's always someone to clean up after dinner. You're a sexist pig, Mrs. Wallner said, but she said it with a smile, and she walked up behind her husband and kissed him loudly on the forehead. She's totally crazy about him, Emily thought with some dismay. What on earth does she see in him? He really is a sexist pig. It's Emily's turn, Jessie said. Nancy and I cleaned up last night. Can you take my turn tonight? Emily asked, staring at her sweater on Jessie. I've just got to get up to the computer and finish my social studies report. I'll clean up 3 nights in a row, I promise. Jessie reluctantly agreed. Emily excused herself and started to leave the room. How's the report going? Mr. Wallner asked. It's on Chile, right? Emily was a bit stunned that her new stepfather remembered what she was working on. She didn't think he was at all interested in her schoolwork. I've written pages and pages, she told him. I just have to finish writing the last part and then print it out. Could I see it after you print it out? He asked. Sure, okay, great, Emily stammered. It was the first time he had really tried to reach out to her, and she was surprised to see that she felt really pleased. She hurried up to her room, sat down at the desk, and clicked on the computer. She slid in her disk, then remembered her sweater. She turned and looked over at her dresser. Was the top drawer slightly open? She couldn't really tell. Besides, what would that prove? Should she get up and look for it? No, she had to get the report on Chile finished and printed out before Josh arrived. Yes, she was too curious not to look. She walked over to the dresser and pulled open the drawer. The sweater, she remembered clearly, had been right on top. It wasn't there now. She searched through the dresser quickly. No sweater. Jessie had been lying. Jessie was wearing her sweater. I can't think about this now, she told herself, pushing the dresser drawer back in and walking back to the desk. She called up her report on the computer and then searched her binder for her notes. She had already written 12 pages, just 2 more sections to write. She found her place and began to type, her fingers clicking rapidly over the keyboard. Down the hall, she could hear the blare of heavy metal music filtering through Rich's closed bedroom door. From downstairs, she could hear the clatter of dishes. Concentrating harder, she shut out all the sounds and worked on transferring her notes onto the computer in sentences that resembled English. She worked nonstop for nearly 45 minutes, then realized that she was starving. Because of the dispute over the sweater, she hadn't eaten much dinner. She scrolled back the last 2 paragraphs she had written and read them over, leaning forward until her face was just inches from the amber monitor screen. Pleased with what she had done so far, Emily took a deep breath, stretched, and headed down to the kitchen for a snack. Hey, where is everyone? She called, startled to find the dinner dishes all cleaned, everything back in place, and no one around. She took an apple from the fruit bin in the refrigerator, washed it off in the kitchen sink, and took a bite. It was crunchy and fairly sweet. Hearing sounds in the den, she walked over to the doorway. Her mom and stepfather were on the brown leather couch, making out like teenagers. Emily tiptoed back to the hallway, then climbed the stairs to her room. Hey, she cried out. Jessie, seated at the computer, looked up slowly. Oh, hi. What are you doing there? Emily cried. I'm working on my report. Jessie's tiny features narrowed in confusion. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. She pushed the desk chair back and climbed to her feet. It's all yours, she said, gesturing grandly to the computer with a sweep of her hands. Let me know when you're finished, okay? Yeah, sure, Emily said. She sat down at the keyboard and called up her report. But it didn't come up on the screen. Feeling her throat tighten with apprehension, she called up the report again. Start a new file? The screen asked. She checked the list of files, and uttered a silent cry when the report did not appear there. Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. She realized her hands were trembling. Her report had been erased. It was gone. Gone forever. Jessie! She screamed. You erased my whole report? What? Jessie's pale blue eyes opened wide in surprise. You heard me, Emily shrieked. How could you? You deliberately erased my whole report? Emily was screaming at the top of her lungs, but she didn't care. All of those days and days of work, gone forever. This was the worst thing anyone had ever done to her. You erased everything? I did not, Jessie cried, backing away from Emily. The computer was turned off when I came into the room. You filthy liar! Unable to contain her anger, Emily lunged at Jessie. She caught her by surprise, pushed her to the floor, jumped on top of her, and began pounding her with her fists in a rage that frightened even her. Chapter 4. What on earth? Mrs. Wallner was in the room first, followed by her grim-faced husband. Emily had already stopped fighting. She gave no resistance as Mr. Wallner pulled her off Jessie. She stood up unsteadily, jerking out of his grip, shaking all over, surprised to find that her face was wet with tears. When did I start to cry, she wondered. Jessie, what happened? Are you okay? Mrs. Wallner leaned down and gently helped Jessie to her feet. Jessie's normally perfect hair was wet and matted against her face. She was breathing hard, gasping for breath, unable to speak. Oh no, I tore the sweater, Emily wailed, seeing the long rip on Jessie's sleeve. Is that what this is about? The sweater? Mr. Wallner asked, hands on his hips. He was forcing himself not to shout, to stay calm, but the veins on his temples throbbed, and his face was very red. What's going on? Nancy and Rich pushed through the doorway into the bedroom at the same time. Nothing, Mr. Wallner said quickly. You two, out. He pointed to the door. They stared at Jessie and Emily for a long moment, then obediently backed out of the room. I've never been in a fight in my life, Emily thought. How did this happen? She grabbed up a handful of tissues from the box on her dresser and wiped her eyes and wet cheeks. If only I could stop shaking. What is this about? Mr. Wallner demanded. Ask her, Jessie said bitterly, fingering the tear in the sweater sleeve. Jessie deliberately erased my report, Emily said, her voice as shaky as the rest of her. That's a lie, Jessie said, a total lie. I went downstairs for a snack, Emily started. When I came back, Jessie was working on the computer, and my report, it was erased. Oh, how awful, Mrs. Wallner said sympathetically, shaking her head. You've been working so hard on it. But, Emily, I'm sure it was an accident. Accident? Emily shrieked. Now, calm down, Emily. You're upset, so you're not thinking clearly, her mother said. It's clear she did it on purpose, Emily said. Emily, don't say things like that. Her mother raised her voice. No matter what happened, there's no excuse for fighting. I can't believe you attacked Jessie. I attacked her? Emily shrieked, her voice so high and shrill it hurt her throat. I wasn't the one who... Stop. Just stop, her mother said, balling her hands into tight fists at her side. I don't want to hear any more. I just know we can't have this kind of fighting in our house. She looked to her husband for support. He nodded somberly, but didn't say anything. But my whole report, Emily wailed. You two have got to work out your differences, Mr. Wallner said. You have no choice. You have to get along. This must never happen again, Mrs. Wallner said. But don't you want to know what happened? Emily cried, more a desperate plea than a question. We don't want to hear another word until you've apologized to Jessie, Mrs. Wallner said through clenched teeth. Emily uttered a cry of protest. Me? Apologize to her? Yes, her mother insisted. You jumped on her, you hit her, you tore her sweater, didn't you? Her sweater? Emily? Her mother's eyes narrowed in anger. She was about to explode, Emily realized. and if she exploded, the first thing she'd say was that Emily was grounded and couldn't see Josh for a week, or a month, or a year. Emily sighed, a sigh of defeat, of resignation. That doesn't sound like an apology, her mother said. She doesn't have to apologize, Jessie said, rubbing her arm. That's very generous of you, Jessie, Mrs. Wallner said, but I said she does. Sorry, Emily muttered to the floor. Frankly, I'm ashamed of both of you, Mr. Wallner said, shaking his head sadly. This has made me very unhappy. He strode quickly out of the room, his hands stuffed into his pants pockets. I know you two can get along, Mrs. Wallner said, whispering for some reason after her husband left the room. Just try harder, okay? Both girls muttered okay. Mrs. Wallner stooped to pick up some notebook paper that had fallen from the desk, then walked out without looking at either of them. I can't believe she was on Jessie's side, Emily thought, feeling completely betrayed. She looked up to see Jessie, leaning against the closet door, glaring at her, her face tight, her normally placid eyes burning into Emily's. Don't ever do that again, Jessie said slowly, pronouncing each word distinctly in a menacing, low voice Emily had never heard before. Emily was so surprised, she just stared back at her. I don't know what you have against me, Jessie said bitterly. I don't know why you're trying so hard to make me look bad, but I'm warning you, Emily, just stop it. Don't ever embarrass me like that again in front of my father. You're warning me? Emily started to protest. But Tiger scampered into the room, sniffed Emily's ankles, then, his tail stub wagging furiously, hurried over to do the same to Jessie. Get out of here, you filthy thing, Jessie snarled, and kicked at the little dog. Tiger yelped, more out of surprise than pain, and ran back to Emily. Don't kick my dog, Emily shouted, feeling her anger begin to rise again. I didn't kick it, Jessie said. I just kicked at it. Emily picked up Tiger and hugged him. Carrying him against her shoulder, she turned and ran out of the room. She walked down the hall to Nancy's room. The door was open, so she walked in. Nancy was sitting on her bed, a book in her lap, as if waiting for Emily. Nancy's room was smaller than Emily's, long and narrow, with a tall pink-curtained window overlooking the backyard at the end. Nancy was a collector. She collected glass bottles and shells and interesting stones and antique dolls and old children's books and charm bracelet charms and matchbooks and baseball trading cards, among other things. To hold her collections, their father had built long wooden shelves that stretched along one entire wall of the room, from floor to ceiling. Nancy has never thrown away or given away anything, he had always complained. Someday, we're going to have to give her the entire house just to hold her stuff. Emily, who never seemed to be able to save or collect anything, really admired this quality in her sister. Sometimes she would wander into Nancy's room and just marvel at all the things her sister had found interesting enough to save, running her hands over the smooth glass bottles, examining the tiny silver charms, even though she'd examined them at least a dozen times before. Now she stood in the doorway and put down Tiger, who immediately scampered away. Can I come in? Of course, Nancy said, putting aside her book. Come sit down. She patted a spot beside her on the bedspread. Emily gratefully sat down beside her sister. She stared down at the white shag rug at her feet, still feeling very shaky, and didn't say anything. You certainly look a mess, Nancy said with tenderness, not as a criticism. Emily forced a faint smile. I guess I do, but at least Jessie's hair got messed up. That's a first, right? What on earth happened? Nancy asked, running her hand through Emily's hair tenderly, pushing it back off her forehead. Why were you fighting? She erased my entire report, Emily said, sobbing despite her attempts to calm down. Do you think it was on purpose? It had to be, Emily insisted. All that work, lost. Now I'll flunk social studies for sure. Emily, calm down, Nancy said softly. I'm sure Mr. Harrison will understand. Oh, sure, Emily wailed. He'll really believe me, won't he? I might as well just tell him the dog ate my homework. Well, you still got your notes, right? You can rewrite it. It'll take weeks, Emily sobbed. I'd already written 14 pages and now they're gone. Nancy handed her a tissue. Emily wiped her eyes. So you accused Jessie of erasing your report? Nancy asked. Then what happened? Then I totally lost it, Emily said, the words catching in her throat. I don't know. I just went bananas. She made me so mad. You know, you really have to go easy on Jessie, Nancy said, shoving the box of tissues into her sister's lap. Huh? Jessie has a lot of problems, Nancy said. She pulled herself back onto the pillows and leaned against the headboard. What do you mean? Emily was confused. Mom told me yesterday. She said Jessie has some serious emotional problems. She sees a shrink twice a week. Really? I didn't know that. Emily blew her nose. She was starting to feel a little steadier. I guess that was one of the hard adjustments for Jessie when she moved here, Nancy said, getting up and closing the bedroom door. You mean she had to leave her psychiatrist behind and find a new one here in Shadyside? Nancy resumed her place on the bed. How come? What kind of emotional problems? Emily asked, whispering even though the door was now closed. Nancy shrugged her narrow shoulders. You know, Mom, she wouldn't tell me. Mom never likes unpleasant details. Tell me about it, Emily groaned, rolling her eyes. Her mother didn't even want to hear why she went berserk a few minutes ago. She didn't tell you anything? Well, she did a little. Nancy leaned forward and whispered, her face close to Emily's. Emily could smell peppermint on her breath. She said Jessie got into serious trouble at her old school. Something really bad happened. What? Emily asked eagerly. Mom didn't say? Didn't you ask her? I wanted to, Nancy said, lying back on the bed. But Rich came home just then, and that was the end of the conversation? Something really bad happened, huh? That's what Mom said? I'll bet that's why Jessie's mother was in such a hurry to send her here. Maybe, Nancy said. We'll never get the details from Mom, especially not now. Just be careful with her, Em. Try to keep out of her way, okay? She's a very troubled girl. Emily started to say something, but the doorbell rang downstairs. That must be Josh, she said, looking at the clock on Nancy's shelf. 9 o'clock. You know Josh, Mr. Prompt. She pulled open the bedroom door. Thanks for the talk, Nance. Nancy shrugged. She looked just like their mother when she did that, Emily thought. Emily closed the door behind her and headed down to greet Josh. As she passed her room, she peeked inside and saw Jessie working intently on the computer. Emily continued down the stairs, thinking about Nancy's warning. Hey, did you get your report finished? Josh asked, wiping his work boots on the floor mat before following her into the living room. He tossed his down coat onto a chair and plopped down on the brown corduroy couch. Emily sighed. That's a long story. She sat down beside him, thinking how glad she was to see him. He looked so cute, she thought. She loved his black curly hair and his dark intense eyes. He was short, at least an inch shorter than she, but it didn't bother her. He was so energetic, so fast-talking, so quick-moving, that it somehow made up for his shortness of stature. He was wearing a gray and maroon Shadyside High sweatshirt and faded jeans. She just wanted to cuddle up with him and not say a word. Want to tell it to me? He asked. I'm in the mood for a long story. You just want to avoid studying, she said, giving him a playful shove. A grin slowly spread across his face. He looks 10 years old when he grins like that, she thought. What have you got to eat? He asked. He ate as much as 10 boys, but somehow he stayed really skinny. She took his hand and pulled him into the kitchen. She made him a bologna and Swiss cheese sandwich and loaded his plate up with potato chips. Aren't you going to eat anything? He asked. I don't eat 6 meals a day like you, she cracked. This is only my 5th, he replied, biting into the sandwich, getting mustard over his top lip. Besides, this is just a snack. Are you going to tell me what happened to your report? I guess. She pulled out a kitchen chair and scooted in across the table from him. She told him the whole story as she watched him eat the sandwich and potato chips. Well, what do you think? She asked when she was finished. I think I'd like to meet her, he joked. She sounds really great. Very funny. Remind me later to laugh, she said sarcastically, and got up and headed to the living room. He caught up with her and put his hands on her shoulders. Sorry, bad joke. I was just trying to keep it light. It isn't light, it's serious, Emily insisted. She pulled away from him and sat down on the couch. Well, I think you should wait until you're calm and then go discuss it with your mother. I can't, Emily said with some bitterness. Mom never wants to hear about any problems, especially now. She's off on cloud 9 with her new husband. You should see them making out like teenagers. It's really disgusting. Josh leapt over the couch back into her lap. Doesn't sound like a bad idea to me. Emily shoved him hard and he toppled to the floor. The only person I have to confide in is Nancy, she said. Josh looked up at her uncomfortably. He always looked uncomfortable whenever she mentioned Nancy. Maybe he feels guilty for dumping her, Emily thought. If he only knew that she had been about to dump him. Whenever Josh ran into Nancy at her house, they got along fine and chatted like old friends. But Emily could tell that Josh was nervous around Nancy, and not really himself. Hey, are we going to study or what? Josh asked, picking up the notebooks he had brought. I guess we can try, Emily said, without enthusiasm. Her mind was still on Jessie, on the fight they'd had, on having to face her again later. And she thought about Nancy's warning. What kind of bad trouble had Jessie been in, Emily wondered. After less than an hour, she slammed her textbook shut. I can't concentrate, she said, tossing the book onto the floor. Josh tossed his book down, too. Then he slid closer to her and put his arm around her shoulders. He pulled her close to him. He felt so warm, so safe. His skin smelled sweet to Emily. She kissed him on the cheek, and then he turned her face and kissed her on the lips. Suddenly, she pulled away from him and uttered a whispered cry. She had a funny feeling that they were being watched. What's wrong? Josh whispered, moving to resume their kiss. Emily looked toward the front stairway. The hall was dark, but in the shadows she could see someone watching them from the staircase. Jessie. She's taken over my room, she's wearing my clothes, and now she's spying on me, Emily thought angrily. Well, there's one thing of mine that she can't have. Josh. I hope the little peeping Tom enjoys the show. Emily reached up with both hands, pulled Josh's face to hers, closed her eyes, and kissed him with renewed passion. A soft voice woke Emily from a deep sleep. She looked for the clock on her night table, then remembered that the night table was next to Jessie's bed now. She closed her eyes, but the voice continued in a loud whisper. Jessie's voice. Emily was half awake. It must be very late, she thought. The sky outside the bedroom window was black and starless. In the darkness, she could see Jessie on the other side of the room, sitting on the floor in a corner beside the desk. She was talking on the phone. Who can she be calling this late at night? Emily wondered, her mind still fogged by sleep. She could just barely make out a few words Jessie was saying. She seemed to be having an intense whispered conversation with someone. Who was it? What was she talking about so seriously, so heatedly? Emily raised her head from the pillow to hear better. I could kill her, Jessie was saying into the phone. I really could kill her.